And welcome to the March No Code Northeast. Nice to see some new faces as well as some people who were at the last event. Hiya. That's it. Now that's a background. Either that or you're a long, long way away. Right.
Wow.
So just to go through the agenda for today, what we're going to be doing, and apologies for the screaming children in the background, but first thing we'll do is just quick welcome, and then I'm going to go through a few updates for those who were here last time. We've made some progress on some of the points that were brought up and discussed, and I wanted to just give a little bit of an update with that. And then we've got Laura, who's here with us, who's going to do a talk after the updates. Time for a Q&A, and then if people are up for it, there's a bit of networking time afterwards before we close. We'll probably not go till 8 o'clock tonight, but let's see how it goes. If there's active conversation, then more than happy to stay as long as people would like to. And hi, Fernando. Nice to see you in the first meeting.
Hi.
All right, so this is the vision of No Code Northeast for those who weren't here last time, and that is to have a vibrant no code and low code community in the Northeast as an active part of the wider digital ecosystem. So that's why we're here, I guess. We spoke last time. We had a bit of a session all together where people put in some ideas. We already had a few ideas as well. Some of these were started to develop in terms of the next few months. I'm not going to show this every month, by the way. I just thought, for those who were here last time, apologies for the repetition. Although this fits a little bit new, but this is what we're looking at as a to be confirmed future session list. We have a number of speakers for some of these, and some people even at least one in the room I'll be coming to discuss with as well. Next month we're looking at a deep dive. We've got we're in contact with 3 of the major no code products to talk about a product deep dive. So we're looking forward to one of those 3 products happening next month in April. In May we've got no code for nonprofits, which there'll be more information released about soon. In June, no code lightning talks. If anyone wants to put forward a lightning talk that they want to do on a particular software that they've used, or something else other than software, I guess, but yeah, any platforms that they've used or software that they've used, we'll be looking for people to do quick fire, short, sort of 5-minute introductions to that. In July, we're looking at no code apps for local, so local no code apps. We've got 2. Ian, I'm looking at you now. I'm hoping someone from Excel Point will talk for us then, and I'll catch up with you hopefully soon about that, and potentially others as well. So we're hoping to give a platform to the local no code people who have literally, as you said, Ian, last time, what is it, 20 years you've been doing no code while all of us have been working out what the heck it is. Yep. And then August, coming back to a deep dive in terms of looking at one of those 3 major products. So that's roughly speaking what we're planning to do over the next few months, based on a lot of feedback we got last time. But this is to be confirmed, and if you're interested in giving a talk, we'd really love to hear from you. There's a link at the bottom there, bit.ly link. There's also a link on the website as well, if you don't have any way to take that down, but it's just bit.ly no code talks. Just to be really clear about what we're looking for in a talk is that it's not a sales opportunity, but at the same time it is a showcase opportunity. It's a great opportunity for you to demonstrate your product, your service, or no code development that you've done to peers. So we're really interested, as well as everyone said or many people said at the last session, really hear about what people have been doing with no code. The Northeast is a priority, but it's not. We're not only accepting talk ideas from people in the Northeast. So if you're part of bigger communities in no code, if you've got people you just think that would just be so great at no code Northeast, please let them know so they can come and tell the story. We want to hear from people outside the region as well to understand what's going on across the board. And we want to be inclusive and diverse. I think that's really important as well. We're interested in hearing from people, particularly from underrepresented groups. So that's a bit.ly link with No Code Talks, and you can access that from the website as well if you're interested in giving a talk. Future plans, we've shuffled this around a little bit, got it into a bit of a structure. So roughly speaking, we're looking at quarters here. So first quarter, we're looking at infrastructure. So we set up a Slack. You can access that through the website. I've got details on the next slide as well. So we set up a No Code Northeast Slack. I'd encourage anyone who uses Slack and is active on there, or even if you're not, if you want another app to install, then please do install Slack and join us there. We'll be taking it easy there in the short term, but as things start to ramp up, hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about, and we'll want everyone to get involved in all the different things that we're doing. We set up a mailing list, so we started email people from there last night, and we'll be keeping most people up to date through the mailing list. So obviously there'll be information on the website and through Twitter, but the mailing list is where we'll primarily want to be sending out information about what's happening at the next meetup and so forth. We're still working on the code of conduct. We've been developing a code of conduct for our new enterprise space in Sunderland. So we're working with other members of the team around that. And we're also looking at a no-code suppliers database and showcase database that hopefully will be launched by the end of March, to allow people to have a bit of a showcase from the local perspective and make the site more about the Northeast community rather than just the meetups. In April, we're looking at a number of different roundtables, and we want to start some conversations. Again, these were asked for within the discussions last month, but we want to have some roundtable discussions that will probably happen during the day rather than in the evening like this. So it'll open us up to another audience. 3 topics there that we've kind of picked up, but that we could go for other topics as well. If people have got any ideas, please do email them through. If you want to lead a conversation around a roundtable, then we'd be super interested to hear from you on that. And then looking at Q3, we're looking at doing a No Code Northeast conference. We've been speaking to a lot of the major suppliers of no code tools and various different communities about representing at a conference, which we'd hope will be in person. Plus a building public collaboration day, whether that happens as part of the conference or something slightly separate, then we'll work that out. Again, any ideas welcome. We'll start the conversations for those on the Slack channel, and we really encourage contribution. One thing I didn't mention about the meetups is, I don't think, is just on these ones here, is that I think we're going to aim for the lightning talks in June to be the first time that we do an in-person meetup. So just to let you know on that, so we'll probably keep going virtual till June, but look for the June meetup to be in person, and we'll share the venue for that soon. So just to say, if you want to get more involved, then the next event is on the 5th of April. That should be going live today or tomorrow on Meetup and on Eventbrite. Details of the speaker to follow. So every Tuesday of the month, if you want to put a nice reminder in every month for the ongoing future. You can join a Slack group. The details are on the website. Rather than put a long URL on here, you can just click on the link in the Get Involved section on the website. You can follow us on Twitter if you're not already, No Code Northeast. And if you want to join the mailing list or find out any of the other information at nocodenortheast.com. So, without further ado, I will now. Oh no, sorry, forgot. Don't know if anyone saw, but Max, who was at our last event at our launch, posted this couple of tweets. I don't know if you can actually see that with the screen size, but basically saying that he was thinking about what to do for Ukraine, with everyone obviously got a lot of eyes and thoughts over there. He's actually set up a no-code effort and got I think it's 20 no-coders involved so far. And I just wanted to highlight it in case anyone was interested. If you wanted to get in contact with Max, you can find his Twitter handle there. It's Haining Max, or if you do a search for 100 Days of No Code, you'll find Max. And if you drop him a DM, then you can get involved in that. They had an initial weekend this weekend, I believe, which was primarily focused around, as it says there, ideation, wireframes, and looking at what they could do. So they have started the process, but if anyone wants to get involved, I'm sure Max would be really happy to hear from you. So now, without further ado, I will hand over to Laura. Laura is going to talk about her experience with no code, and thank you very much, Laura, for joining us today. I will stop sharing my screen so that you can take over, and yeah, hand it over to you.
Awesome, thanks very much. And thanks for inviting me to come and talk about my experiences. I've got some slides. I got a little bit carried away, so there's like graphics that I'm very proud of, so you'll have to be very impressed, because it's not a thing to come and talk about building stuff. So nice to see everyone that I've met before. Nice to see people I don't know. My name's Laura, and I have been working in the tech sector and with charities and social enterprises for the last almost 15 years in a marketing and communications role. So I work in sort of marketing, PR, and comms. Over the last 15 years, I've almost perfectly flip-flopped. So I'd work for a charity, and then I'd get a job working somewhere in the tech sector, and then I'd go back to working for a charity, and then I'd go back to working in the tech sector. And there has been this sort of backwards and back and forth throughout my career. In that time, but particularly when I first started working in the tech sector, where I worked for North Star Ventures, I got introduced to concepts like design thinking and human-centered design, and started to get interested in some of the processes around how to build services, how to build products that solve problems for people, that put people at their center, and that has fed through into comms campaigns, into PR and marketing tactics and techniques, but it's always been a sort of an interest. It's also very strange to me to be sitting here talking about my journey as a founder, and obviously through the companies I've worked for, through North Star Ventures, through Sunderland Software City, through the Digital Catapult. I've done a lot of work supporting other people, other founders, other startups, and now today I'm on the Ignite Pre-Accelerator. In the past, I have been a mentor on Ignite, so it has been quite a strange journey. The first lesson, sort of lesson I wanted to share about no code. I've got a series of lessons to share today. Was really this idea that no code can be anybody's superpower. I'm part of the no code community on Twitter. It's super active. I've met like some amazing people around the world who are really passionate about no code, as I'm sure lots of people here are. And there's this notion that no code is a superpower, but I think it's really important that it can be a superpower for anyone. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to have a particularly big goal. So when I started with no code, it was actually whilst I was working in-house, and so I was working. It was whilst I was working for Software City, and we started using or exploring Airtable as a way of managing our processes in-house. And through that introduction, I got really interested and really excited about just how much I could make other things, other platforms speak to each other, and how much I could cut out of my workload. So I don't particularly like busy work. I don't particularly like doing the same tasks time and time again. So got really interested in what could I automate. And once I got into this process of syncing up one thing I was using with another, and cutting out the bit where I had to copy and paste things from my social analytics into sheets or whatever it might be, it became quite addictive. And I actually, I popped the WordPress logo up on that screen as well, because I think that was actually probably where I first got started with no code, really without even knowing that it was something that was called no code. So obviously working in marketing roles, often set up websites for charities and organizations I was working for, and that visual editor, that drag and drop process is essentially all we're talking about when we're talking about all the introductory level of no code. So my introduction to no code was looking at internal systems and processes, looking at where I could speed things up for myself, looking at what I could automate in terms of the things I was doing day in, day out. And I'd always sort of thought of myself as kind of good with tech. I can pick things up quickly, and really just had quite a lot of fun with it. So I started playing around with some APIs, seeing what could I sync up with Airtable. Spent some time supporting an organization. We had fun with things like, could we set things up so that people could submit a form and we could display it on Google Maps and things like that. So without any formal technical training, I suddenly realized that there was an awful lot that I could do myself and I could do on behalf of other people. So this is my lovely little graphic that I created. The first steps in no code that I took was along the bottom of this no code pyramid. And this is my very own no code pyramid. I made this up when I was trying to explain to someone what I meant by no code. And for me, automations, it really is that base level, that foundation of no code tools. It's the stuff that we can all get involved in, and actually, like I said, you don't need to be trying to build something specific to be able to start playing with no code. Lesson number 2 on my no code journey was to keep it simple. Now there we go. So once I realized just what I could do with basically what I could do with Zapier and what I could do with other no-code integrations, I wanted to get more involved, and I started getting quite excited at the thought that I might be able to start creating things and start sort of creating kind of mini or micro products with some of the tools that were available. As part of that journey, I joined something called On Deck. So On Deck is essentially like a virtual incubator or virtual accelerator program. They've got a really interesting model in terms of how they look at the tech ecosystem. But last year they launched their second cohort for people interested in no code. So it was the On Deck no code cohort, or on Deck no code fellowship. So I applied for that and was accepted. There was an interview, but it was mainly around this sort of interest and a little bit of experience rather than any sort of real qualifications that you needed to get on. But what On Deck gave me was sort of this immersion in a range of no-code tools that I hadn't come across, and also a sort of a structure and some challenges around building quickly, shipping quickly, actually having fun but getting things done. So I started to play with a few more kind of no-code tools. So I absolutely love Card. Card is amazing if you want to set up really simple one-page websites. Started playing with Glide and using Glide to essentially display data from Google Sheets, but I still use that today. I actually use that for reporting sort of portals or client portals when I am freelancing. Started playing around with Rose, and was introduced for the first time to Bubble, which is I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a bit. Through this process, what was really fun was being set challenges to build something and ship it in a week, and it didn't really matter what it was. On Deck used a phrase which I don't love. So the idea of the like dumb or super simple apps, things that you essentially build to learn. But what I learned through that process was the simpler the concept, or the simpler the problem was that I was trying to solve, the better things went. So the most popular thing that I shipped whilst I was on Deck was something that let people sign up to receive a daily email with a roundup of all the journalistic requests that were coming through on Twitter related to business and technology. And it was super simple to set up. I used Card and Airtable for my sign up. I used Rose for the automation, and and Rose had a native integration or a native function that let you send out and display data in email format. So it was super simple to do, but actually it solved a real problem for people, or a real sort of so it was something interesting, and it was something that was really straightforward to sell to people. And it was essentially, it had the whole setup, the whole project, the whole product, if you can call it that, had one purpose: to send this email out every day. And that was a great way to start learning how to actually sort of build more complex integrations, to build more complicated processes, and to essentially package these as a product. And that would be where I'd say that sits in the middle of this pyramid, my no-code pyramid. It was using platforms, using no-code tools that had either really offered a single function. So like Card, it lets you set up a website. It doesn't try to do everything. There's a limited amount of functionality, but it does what it does really well. And with those, you can start building out these really simple but effective applications. So like I say, it looks great for me as a freelancer when I onboard a client and they fill out a form and they're set up on our system straight away. And then every month they can log into their dashboard, which is just a Glides app, and see how their content has been performing. And I don't have to do anything for that. That's all set up now so that it runs automatically. But it looks great, even though it's a simple application. Lesson number 3. So this lesson still came whilst I was on deck. So on deck was ran for about 4 months in total. Was that you have to pick the right tool, even with no code, or especially with no code. I made some really big mistakes when I was getting started with these slightly bigger builds, with slightly more complicated no code projects. As part of On Deck, we had to come up with something which they called a capstone project. So essentially, like our flagship thing that we wanted to build over the course of about 8 weeks. And I'd had this idea for a while. It had come from that experience of working in marketing, working in comms, running public affairs campaigns for charities. It came from that knowledge of what technology was able to do from my experience in the tech sector, and also the frustration of then going back to working with charities and social enterprises that we're having to use tools that weren't fit for purpose. They were having to make do with things that were just okay, but hadn't been particularly well developed. A lot of tools that didn't speak to each other. And from that frustration, from that first-hand experience, I'd come up with this idea that if as an organization you wanted to make it easy for people to email their MP, it should be as easy as it is to sign a change.org petition to send that email to an MP. And I came up with this concept called ManyHands, looking at kind of this idea of community lobbying or digital advocacy. And I knew and loved Airtable. I'd been introduced to Softer through On Deck. So a lot of On Deck, there were a lot of these like build-alongs and sessions where you could kind of get hands-on and start working out what platforms could do. So I was like, cool, I know Airtable. I'm looking to capture information from charities. I'm looking to display it somewhere else. Like this will be great. So I started building my capstone project using Airtable and Softer. And it was entirely the wrong stack for what I was trying to do. The functionality that I was looking to offer through ManyHands wasn't possible through Airtable and Softer. So here, what I was looking to do was something that really sits in the top of that pyramid. I was looking at some fairly complicated data capture. I needed to be able to display dynamic data. I needed, essentially, I was looking to build a micro SaaS, and actually, in terms of what that was meant to offer clients, it wasn't possible with Softer. So this was the end result of my capstone project. It was I'm not going to say a disaster. It was a good learning process, a good learning experience, but it wasn't a functioning product, and it certainly wasn't sort of an example of how no-code tools could work. So I was using Airtable, I was using Software in order to get this idea for people to be able to set up these automated, auto-populated emails. I then had to go away and log into people's websites and set things up, and there was HTML coding required as well. So more of a low-code offer, but also with some manual, like hands-on manual person-powered process. And this is the demo I recorded at the time. I'm just going to play it because I mean, it's super embarrassing, but it just shows how not right or how not polished this looked in the end. Oh, sorry, is that going to let me play? Welcome to the Welcome to the ManyHands app. So if you want to launch a new campaign, you click on launch a new campaign. This is very Blue Peter of me, but here's one I filled in earlier. You add a few details about the campaign, hit submit. And then once that's been done, you get everything you need to launch a campaign page, either on your website or as a standalone. And what this does is it lets all of your supporters send an email to your chosen MP or recipient at a click of a button. Or if they're a bit old school, they can download a letter to print off and sign. Other things you can do on the page, you can find an MP. So if you don't know who you need, you just start searching and it'll bring up the email address you need. And you can also see how your campaigns are doing. So as you can see there, not particularly sophisticated in how it looked, but the process of trying to build with no-code tools was one, like the process still taught me quite a lot and taught me, because I was going out and speaking to people, because I was building in public, because I was getting this sort of rapid feedback. What it was, even though the end product wasn't particularly great, certainly wasn't something that I was able to start selling subscriptions to. It did show me, it did give me the feedback that there was something there, that the idea was something that did solve a problem for people. So by the end of this process, even though I didn't have a product, I didn't have a functioning prototype, I had around 12 people who had signed up for sort of access for early trials. I had a couple of really large organizations that were expressed an interest in working with me to test this out, to actually develop this into something more robust. And that brings me on to lesson number 4. So you still need to do the hard work, even with no code. It's not a silver bullet. And I think there's a lot of talk around the idea that if you no longer need a development agency, if you no longer need to be able to code, actually anybody can come up with a great idea and anybody can build. And while to some extent I would say that is true, getting a product right, getting a service right, getting something that solves a problem for people still takes a lot of hard work, still takes user research, still takes conversations. There's still a process that needs to be followed to make sure that what you're building, even with no code tools, is valuable, is going to do the job that you want it to do. And that's sort of where I am at now. So off the back of On Deck, I felt like I had very, very early, or very, very light sort of light touch validation that this concept, that this frustration I'd had first-hand experience of, was something that other people were experiencing, other people in similar roles, other people working in public affairs, in charity comms, were facing the same frustration. So the concept, the idea, felt like there was something there that was worth exploring. So when Ignite announced last year that they were going to be launching bringing their pre-accelerator back to the Northeast, or bringing the accelerator and pre-accelerator back to the Northeast, I decided to apply. And like I said at the very start, that was a really weird thing for me because I have been very used to being on the other side of this process. So starting to see myself as a potential or an aspiring founder felt quite strange. And I actually felt, if I'm being totally honest, when I applied to Ignite, and even at the start of the program, I thought that my lack of technical ability, my lack of like coding skills was going to be my biggest weakness. That was going to be the thing that I was kind of being called up on. So I decided at the end of On Deck that I was going to, that once I realized that Softer and Airtable didn't allow me to do what I was looking to do, I decided to commit to learning how to build with Bubble. Now, some of you, and obviously from what Adam said at the start, Bubble's obviously been mentioned in at the launch event. It definitely sits up in that top part of the pyramid in terms of the functionality and its capabilities as a no-code tool. But Bubble comes with a really steep learning curve. It has a drag and drop editor or it's a visual developer, a visual editor, but it has its own logic. You still have to understand databases. You can set up things like custom states and parent-child relationships and a whole bunch of stuff that I had no idea what it was when I started. And it was one of the reasons why when I was doing On Deck, I decided not to build with Bubble, because it was such a steep learning curve. I felt like it was something I wasn't able to commit to at the time. Now I am still learning with Bubble in between On Deck and Ignite. I've done a Bubble bootcamp. I'm part of a couple of big Bubble communities, and I'm still learning. It is for someone with a non-technical background. I think there is a steep learning curve there. There is a lot to get your head around, but it is also much quicker to get to the stage where you can build something that people can use than it would be to start learning how to build with code from scratch. So I applied to Ignite as a non-technical founder. I thought that was going to be, I went into my interview being like, and I learned Bubble. Look at me, I can build something myself. Don't worry about the fact that I don't have a CTO on my team. I don't have a technical co-founder. I can build with Bubble. And actually what this process so far has been very much, we were actually told in the first couple of weeks that we weren't allowed to build anything. We had to go and speak to people. We had to do our research. We had to really become experts in the problem we were trying to solve. So I am now in the process of building ManyHands version 2. If I'm being totally honest, the functionality that I was looking to build last year, I think some of it will still be in what will become my actual MVP, but I don't know is the honest answer. I actually don't know at this stage what it is I'm going to be looking to build, because that research isn't done, because I haven't worked out yet what the biggest problem is that other organizations are facing, so that I'm not building something just for me. The other thing that Ignite has shown so far, and the sort of that they're drumming into us, is that even when you're building something that you like, even if you're looking to build something that is a global product, you have to start with the smallest bit possible, and that's the thing that you're going to be testing. And this is where I think that no code is amazing, because actually it does let you set something up. It lets you, once you've identified what that smallest possible problem that you're looking to solve is, you can build something really quickly to solve that particular problem, whether or not that is something that needs a little bit more advanced functionality. So whether or not it's something in Bubble, there are other teams on the Ignite Pre-Accelerator where that might be that they are looking at things like Softer and Airtable. They're looking at things like Glide, because actually it doesn't need to be all singing or dancing at this stage. We're just looking to test whether or not we understand, and whether or not we've come up with something that is going to help people in the way that we want it to help them. So I'm at the moment, the stack that I'm looking at using is still using Card because I love it, using Circle for my community management, and using Bubble in terms of building some of those tools. Because again, the early research that I've done does suggest that I was on the right track last year, even though I didn't, the execution wasn't what I was wanting. The execution didn't work the way it was meant to work. So final thoughts on sort of the things I've learned about no code over the last couple of years, but really this has been a more committed journey for me only for the last. Only really I joined on deck last June, so it's been a fairly short journey in terms of getting to know some of these more advanced platforms and really starting to learn what's possible. But for some final thoughts, there's a no-code tool out there for just about everything. Whether or not you are thinking about how to speed up your onboarding process, whether or not you want to cut out repetitive tasks in your working day, whether or not you want to build something that is just for fun or just for you, or just that has a single specific use, or whether or not you're looking to build like a micro SaaS style product. There are some incredible platforms and particularly around SaaS products that have been built and launched using things like Bubble, Adalo, and Builder. So like it's amazing seeing what some of what other people have been building. There's definitely a sliding scale of complexity. I think that I have found, even as a non-technical founder and not someone with no technical background, because I'd played around with automations, because I'd played around with APIs, linking things up through Airtable and Zapier. Coming into learning how to use Bubble has been a little bit easier, because actually the concept of plugins, the concept of APIs was something I was familiar with. So all of those single use, all of those simple automations and integrations that I had done previously have been really helpful in getting to grips with Bubble as a more complicated platform. There's a thriving no-code community. It's absolutely awesome that we've got no-code Northeast. I think there's not that many regional no-code groups as far as I can tell in the UK. But Twitter, like my Twitter feed is just buzzing with no-code creators. But I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, or if this is just this might just be sort of the bubble that I'm in at the moment. But it feels like no-code at the moment is still largely in sort of restricted to creators. So it's individuals, it's small, like it's partnerships, and it's small groups of people that want to build stuff that they want to build, rather than it being sort of accepted as an enterprise offering. Now, I think with particularly some of the Series A rounds that we've seen over the last 6 months or so, like some of these platforms are definitely looking to become enterprise, like to have an enterprise offering, but it feels like this very much, in terms of the people that are using and making the most use of no code, it still feels like it's creators rather than businesses, and that feels like there's a huge opportunity. Like it feels, and Adam and I were speaking about this last week, like I've always liked the idea of being like one of the first in, and I've always felt like I've just come into things slightly too late to be kind of on that, in that first wave. But it feels like we are still in that first wave with no code. Like I know some people have been doing this for a long time, but in terms of the range of platforms, the range of like just the breadth of what you can build and what you can do with this, and people's interest in it, it feels quite like it still is. It's a very exciting and a very exciting time to be starting to explore no code properly. And the final thing is that no code. So even if you're sitting there thinking that you want to pick up no code, you've got an idea for a business, this might be the way to get it out there. Like I think no code really does make it like 100 times easier to test ideas really quickly and to test them at a much lower cost, rather than having to potentially pay an agency to build your MVP for you. Actually, you can test things out pretty quickly. I think there are challenges at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see how these platforms address this around the scalability of no-code applications. Been speaking to a few people over the last few weeks who've sort of flagged that even with platforms like Bubble, which like I say are set up and certainly marketing themselves as a platform for to help people build things like SaaS offerings, the costs can get quite expensive quite quickly as you start to scale. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop. But at the moment, for me, it is really exciting that actually you can prove a concept and you can have a prototype or an MVP in a matter of weeks, especially if you've already done the research, rather than waiting months and months and spending tens of thousands of pounds to get something that might not be right. So yes, it still feels like a really exciting area to explore and a really exciting time to be exploring it. And that's it for me. Thanks very much. If anyone's got any questions, be happy to have a chat.
Thanks, Laura. That was great. Super interesting how you got into it and how you've sort of created the pyramid there. Loved it. Does anyone have any specific questions for Laura and her experiences? Anyone?
No, I've got an interesting observation. Laura, you described that transition from being a novice and getting into something that was a bit bigger and a bit more complex, and therefore you've got to understand databases and child items and all that stuff. And I think for suppliers of no-code platforms, getting that balance right so that novices, or I suppose the right term, citizen developers, can do, plenty of work, but not get confused by the more complex stuff, is challenging in itself. So it's definitely a balancing act for vendors to make it simple for some, but still capable of doing the complex stuff. So I'm interested in your maybe further comments around that. When you reached that stage, was that a dawning of, oh, I need to rethink at this point?
Yeah, so I suppose there's two things. So I think a lot of I think most of the kind of I suppose the platforms that have the kind of the platforms that have the buzz at the moment around them, what a lot of them seem to do really well is create the resources and the tutorials and the community around their platform, so that you can learn. And they have their own academy, so like their own academies, their own resources, their own training videos available freely online. So in terms of actually being able to get to grips with a lot of that, there is a lot out there, and these platforms are, I suppose, it feels like they recognize that they are going to have to educate people who maybe aren't familiar with some of the more technical aspects, if they want people to be able to come and make full use of their platforms, what they're offering. So a lot of what I've learned has been through like video tutorials, walkthroughs, build-alongs, that either the platforms themselves or their communities are sharing freely. There's definitely some stuff that's behind a paywall. So I'm part of a community that at the moment that I do pay for, but they have for Bubble, they have like one of the most extensive ranges of videos and tutorials and courses. So for me, that makes sense. And obviously I'm looking to build something at the moment that is a commercial offering. So
yeah,
but there has been a lot out there for free. And I was going to say something else there. What was this? There was a second part to your question. Sorry.
Yeah, the rethink moment. I mean, my own view of where that complexity starts to stretch a citizen developer is companies have to get better at configuration by convention and artificial intelligence and machine learning, and so that you remove even those blockers from a citizen developer and try to do a lot more of it automatically for them. Do the thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, so I suppose that moment where, and I think I resisted that moment for a while. Like it was like I was in denial, because I'd done a couple of Bubble like walkthroughs or build-alongs, I'd seen just how complex the platform could be, and I really didn't want to have to go and learn how to structure databases. And again, it's not because it's not so like some of and again, this is Bubble specific, but they call things like slightly, they've got slightly different naming conventions and things. So it's not even like you could just go and watch what or read something about databases that existed already. Like sometimes it has to be, you have to kind of either adapt it for the platform you're looking at, or you have to go and find specific resources created by someone who has already figured it out. So I resisted that for quite a long time. Like throughout the whole of the on deck process, I was able to do what I wanted to do without having to kind of embrace that complexity. And then I had that moment. I was like basically, oh crap, now I'm like I'm gonna have to go back to basics, and like, if I really want to do what I want to do, and it looks like, let's say through the feedback and the testing, it looks like the reason everyone's got all these organizations have this manual workaround is because no one has built this yet, and that's probably because there is a degree of complexity there that requires unpicking. So it meant going back to basics. It meant going back to the tutorials, back to the walkthroughs, to lots of reading about and speaking to developers about, actually, sorry, can you explain again, like, what on earth is a database? What's the difference between relational and non-relational database? Like, it was really like going back to school on it. And if I'm like I say, I'm certainly not proficient with Bubble yet. Like it is still a learning. I'm still on this journey of learning how to do what I need to do. But it looks like it's going to be a better fit in terms of building that MVP through Ignite.
Fernando, did you have a question? Your hand went. Yeah. Do you want to go?
Yes, thank you. So today is my first exposure to non-coding. So what, and I don't know much about it really. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Well, make an observation. I noticed that in the place where I work, there is, at the enterprise level, there is an attempt to provide non-code facilities. So the Microsoft Power Automate is being used, but I noticed that people that do not have at least a bit of background in informatics struggle with data types, for example. The question I wanted to ask is, as what you're learning is probably something that you cannot find in courses at universities or colleges, you probably learn most of it on your own, but did you have any support network, or did you learn it together with some other people, or was it just a completely or was a process that you had to do on your own? That's all I wanted to ask you.
So the early stuff I was doing, so the things like the automations, using Airtable to set up workflows, integrating different tools through Zapier, that was largely just on my own. That was, there's a lot out there that's written about that. Again, the community forums on each of those platforms have so many really, like, people who are happy to explain how they've done it before. In terms of the sort of the more complex no code builds, so because I joined On Deck, that was cohort based. It was a cohort based like course. So there were I think there were about 400 of us on the cohort, but so I had a group of sort of maybe 20-25 people that I spoke to regularly over those few months. We'd all come together for the build-alongs. We had a really active Slack community. So there was a lot of support through On Deck in terms of upskilling, in terms of sharing what we'd learned, sharing resources. And that's a community that I'm still part of now. So there's some people have gone on and like really embraced specific platforms. So they still do like community get-togethers every week. So that was definitely, like, I felt like I was learning alongside other people that were on the journey as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. That's great. Thanks, Laura. Abby.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I found it very interesting because me and Laura have actually had a very similar journey. So I worked in marketing for about 5 years, and I became obsessed with the word automation to the point where one of my previous companies, I had to put £1 in a jar every time I said it. So the whole team was absolutely sick of me saying it. But what I actually did was I've changed career paths, and now I'm a junior developer. Okay. And I think one of the things that I've noticed in the last couple of years is in between like my sort of purely marketing job and sort of becoming a developer, I briefly worked at Newcastle University in a role that sat between marketing and technology. And I think that's something that I'm seeing mainly from the people on LinkedIn who harass me with their job availabilities, that there seems to be a lot of want at the moment for like a marketing tech sort of middleman.
Yeah.
And one of the things that like I know from just random people who I know out in the world is big companies like the Co-op are now initiating these huge no-code ventures where they're getting people who are doing loads of things like macros or doing things with Microsoft Flow and Power BI, and trying to get like a no-code team who sit amongst the whole company and work alongside tech to solve a lot of things. And I think there's a massive, people tend to go one or two ways. They either don't have a dev team and try and do everything themselves, or they have a dev team and just hammer them all day with unnecessary requests for things that no one really needs. And there's a massive opportunity there, I think, to try and nail down where them relationships lie and what can be done by, like what needs to be done by a developer and what can just be done using these systems. And I know when I was doing the thing that actually pushed me into being a developer, when I was doing loads of stuff with Microsoft Flow, there was loads of downfalls in the platform. So I kept on having to download its code for what I'd built and find the bug in the code because it wasn't clear in their sort of drag and drop system, and then correct it by essentially writing essentially writing code in the input box to correct their mistake. And sometimes there's a lot, like now that I'm looking back, there's some things that I did using no code which would have been much simpler to have just learned the code. I think it's really important to try, because I spent hours fixing bugs that was like 2 lines of code where it could have just been written. And it's really hard to try and get that balance, but it's always worth. I think if you're going down the no code route, is like what you were saying before, it's so important to understand the logic behind what's happening. Even if you don't know how to write the code, understand the logic, because you'll spend hours debugging stuff that's just because of a misunderstanding between you and the technology.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, Abby. I think that similar. So some of the projects I've been looking at with charities, as a freelancer, have sat in that space as well. So where it's not marketing, it's not development work. It's like this hybrid. So I've been calling it like digital delivery support, where people have wanted to test out a project or an idea, and we've been able to kind of test things out using tools that are readily available. And what the conversations I've had with those clients has always been around, like, this is even if this is a short-term solution, like before you ask your IT team to come and spend 6 months when they're already like stretched and under the cosh to build something from scratch that might not actually do what you want it to do, why not use something that's already set up to do that? Why not pick a tool that you literally just have to populate with content or whatever it might be? But yeah, it seems to be, I'd agree, there's this sort of hybrid role, and I wonder whether or not that reflects the fact that like communication and user testing and user interviews, like the user experience side of things, is so important. And actually, a lot of marketing people have those it's comms. It's about speaking to people and being able to sift through that information.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no opportunity for it. Even like if you look at like educational options, there's no degree that is some sort of hybrid between marketing and development and understanding like logic and things like that. It's just not there. But I think that's something that will probably change over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I could see that happening, like more sort of data skills being brought into digital marketing courses, things like that.
But I think the other thing that you mentioned as well is about like building things and not like harassing developers for like something where you just like, when you actually see it and try and use it, it just doesn't work how you expected it. But this, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Figma. Yeah. It's like a design, but you can set that up to actually walk through. Like, so it would, when you log onto it, it can actually look like a website and you can click all of those buttons and type in and stuff. And I think that we started using that recently and it saved us from building a lot of stuff that wasn't, like, just when you actually went to use it, just didn't work right.
Just on the education thing, Abby, there's I'm really keen that we, through this group, engage with the universities and through Software City as well. We've got a lot of contacts there. Not just universities, colleges and others, but to really kind of get no code on the agenda there. I think it's super important, because also I still think there's an element of, it fits with what you were saying about the Microsoft experience, but I think there's an element of people being able to code by learning no code, if you see what I mean, and that being a way into coding as well. I think it's not just, you know, that there's a pathway there. We talked about it a bit last month, but yeah, just to let you know that join the Slack and let's talk about that if it's something you're interested in. But I'd definitely like to get some no code experience into the local and regional education.
Oh, brilliant.
Establishments. Right, Nathan.
Yeah, so it's just something I'm slightly curious about, Laura. The way you self-described as being non-technical, because in the pyramid you created in terms of that hierarchy for creation, I'm still at the point of just playing with automations and seeing what's out there. I'm not creating any product, any kind of specification for anything, and so you, in comparison, I would say you are technical for no code compared to myself, but I wonder why you say that. Is there like a point to reach at which you feel you'll have crossed the threshold of being a no code technician, or being is it like an evergreen issue, like we're all like learners in this, and there is no like goalpost to reach?
That's an awesome question, and like I'm pretty sure I saw something, again, conversation online about this very thing, about actually if you can build a full SaaS using Bubble, are you still non-technical? Because surely that you've just done, even if it's a different language or a different platform. Yeah. I suppose I say that because so that I think is probably influenced quite heavily by like past experience of working in VC, past experience of working for like organizations like Software City that support startups. So there's always been this delineation between sort of technical founders, people with you're right, the skills, what would have been described as the skills to go and build the stuff, and the non-technical founders, which might be the person bringing the commercial, the business, the sector experience, for example. That probably does need to shift. So it's a really interesting interesting point. So I think I probably that is probably a hangover from both having heard this conversation over kind of many years.
Yeah.
Ignite is definitely sort of VC focused. So whilst there's no pressure to go and raise VC, that has informed, that's the background of the accelerator, is the idea that you're looking to prove something that is investable and scalable. And again, that means that there are quite traditional roles within teams. I don't know when I would start calling myself a technical founder. I suppose, if I single-handedly build a micro SaaS, I might decide to to change that. And I'm definitely seeing, so some of the people that I was on deck with, like they are now like they're full-time bubble developers. That is their job. They get hired by people to come and build these really cool micro SaaS platforms, and that is their role. So I would probably call them technical, but I see them as being like steps ahead of where I am. So I'll have to come back to you on the exact moment. Yeah.
I suppose it touches on what Fernando raised, is that there's like no formal kind of accreditation you can get in this, and whether that's the way this space is going or not. Because I suppose one reason I'm so excited about no code is just it's scrappy. Everything's kind of put together on the fly, and you test it over and over again until it works.
Yeah, and again, I think that like, if that's how you're approaching it, that's really good habits to be in if you're looking to build products that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathan. David?
Yeah, thank you for the talk, Laura. That was great. And I wanted to pick up on, you said it's still a kind of one-man band kind of thing, enthusiast thing, you think, no code. And it's not something that businesses are being picked up on. And I'm interested, I have some ideas about that. I'm interested as well in your ideas about why that is. I think certainly I would agree that we're at the beginning of the no-code revolution, the exponential curve, if you want to use all those buzzwords. I think that's really, really exciting. My view is that you've got, on the one hand, you've got traditional software development companies with kind of sunk costs in a way in their systems of doing software and their business models that are based on, we have this really scarce resource of software developers. You pay us lots of money, we take you through our process, we build your software. And I think there's a job to do to both show those companies how they can benefit from transitioning from, not only having that as a model, but also getting the message out there to the organizations that can benefit from it. And my experience over the last year, we've launched at Land Digital, we've launched no code labs. And that's come about from us sort of recognizing this opportunity. And one of the things that I found of 20 years of going out there and trying to sell big complex software projects, it takes a very long time to get to talk to the right person, to build the trust, to find the budget, to get, and it can be, if you haven't got a lot of cash behind you, you spend an awful lot of time and resource trying to get to the point that somebody goes, oh, actually, no, we're not going to go ahead, or we're going with someone else. And what no code allows us to do is to very quickly say, oh, do you know what, we could solve the problem for you really quickly. And then you're in there, you've got your foot in the door, you're doing something. People in their organization go, oh, that's good. The guy who brought you in is getting a bit of kudos because, oh, wow, you got that thing sorted really quick. And it's a much lower risk, if you like, way of doing business. And it's given us, we've got a foot in the door with the likes of Honda now, where we're starting to do some no-code things. We could never have gone in an agency like ours, would never have got in through the Honda procurement process to build a XYZ software system. But through no code, we were able to do that. And I think similarly, there's a big job to do. I'm out there talking about no code, and most people I talk to are like, what? And there's a big job to do to get people to understand that. And the hook that we use is, we'll build you a prototype in 3 weeks. It isn't always the case that we can do that, but it's getting the idea across that a software development project isn't some horrendous labor that you've got to go through for months and months. It's something that can be turned around quite quickly and inexpensively. So I think that maybe there's a job for like Software City, for the LEP to do there, both in terms of directing some of this innovation money that's coming into the Northeast towards no code, and as well as supporting agencies, software companies that have got those kind of sunk costs to recognize the benefits of doing it a different way.
Yeah.
Sorry, went on a bit there, but what do you think? Any comments on that? Or any other thoughts?
I mean, I think most businesses And there will be exceptions to this, obviously, and there might be specific people within lots of organizations that have a slightly different take. But most businesses don't massively care what the stack looks like, or like how many times does your average marketing manager ask what language you're building their website in? Are you using CSS or Ruby on Rails? Like these are not, at the end of the day, people want to know, are you building them something that does what they want? So I could see us getting to the point where in the future where actually nobody's talking about code, low code and no code. It's just about actually what's your budget, what's your time frame, and what level of functionality do you require in this particular project. So yeah, so I think the way that it's communicated, that there are clear benefits to using no code for business, like in terms of what you're selling to businesses. And if you communicate that right, like they probably don't know that not everybody's going to come. I can't see many people coming and saying, we really want you to come and build us a website using just no code, but actually they will be interested in the cost savings and the time savings. In terms of the, because this sort of picks up on Ian's comments and Abby's comments, like there are lots of tools out there that have been, even within Microsoft's suite of tools, there's loads of things out there that are no code tools, but they've just sort of almost not got the brand, like they haven't been labeled as no code. So again, thinking about like working for Changing Lives, we had a business processes team that looked after Power BI and how data was captured within Office 365, and they worked quite closely with the IT team. So a lot of that was actually like it was a business processes team that sat somewhere between like IT and ops and comms, building these kind of bespoke processes for the organization. But they've almost, like, again, there wasn't this stamp of, well, we're going to just use no code, or we're going to just use the stuff that we can manage ourselves. It was about actually, as an organization, how do we make better use of all this data? How do we try and get our various systems to talk to each other? So if you're talking to potential clients, if you can articulate, if you can sell the benefit, that's going to be what they care about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that said, we have had one recently, which was a housing association, and the kind of operational people were really interested, all the benefits, what can this do? The IT person was very much compliance, and if you're going to use that, we need to see all of their compliance data and where's the data held and blah, 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 blah. And actually, for some of the tools that we were going to use, and I can't remember the details, that was going to be a challenge to jump through their compliance hoops. Yeah.
And again, I'd expect to see, as some of these platforms start raising more money, as they start really focusing on being able to offer enterprise level, an enterprise level service, we'll start seeing documentation about how they're compliant with ISO 2007 and how they're compliant with GDPR, and because they'll need to, because actually the client, like the companies that are willing to pay enterprise level subscriptions need that. But yeah, I'd agree, it's a challenge at the moment if that's a concern for the client. Not every no code tool is able to respond to that at this point.
Yeah, we are, by the way, doing a no code project with Changing Lives at the moment.
Amazing. Which team are you working with?
I'm not sure. John's working with somebody down in Teesside.
Yeah, awesome. They've got this again. It's interesting because there's like the central team that have business processes, and there's like almost like this. And again, it feels like, to me, it sort of illustrates what we've been talking about quite nicely. Like there's this internal team with business processes and IT and a lot of compliance and a lot of so there's a lot of, not red tape, but red tape to get through. And then you've got projects that are like, we want to do this thing, we've got this problem, we need to speak, like we've got this service that we need to deliver something quickly for. And like the projects are almost more able to be agile and to be more flexible in their approach, because they want to test things out quickly. Now, at the point where that then gets adopted across the entire organization, I think there's potentially this question of, how is this compliant? How does it fit in with the rest of our services? but there is almost this like ability to be a little bit scrappier, to use Nathan's term, a little bit scrappier on the front line, whereas the central organization has to be a little bit more governance focused.
To be honest, I've been a little bit surprised how open they were to working in that innovative way, but then I've just realized you used to work there, so.
Yeah, I've been working on a project with one of the recovery teams just around, they wanted like an online course, so we're using Teachable as a pilot running, and the IT team had said it would be a 6-month development and they'd have to dedicate someone to it like a couple of days a week, and that was literally never going to happen. So we're using something that's already there. There's a small subscription cost, but it's definitely cheaper than trying to develop something from scratch, and it will allow them to gather the data they need to determine if it's worth investing in longer term. So yeah, there's some interesting, like within the projects, there's some interesting work going on.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Laura. Just on the Software City side of things, so obviously we've got this meetup going on. There is definitely a plan to look at how to get, particularly in terms of agencies, that we know of a good few situations recently where there's well-known Northeast agencies who have put in bids for large projects that have been undercut quite significantly by low-code, no-code solutions, which obviously we want to start making sure that kind of money isn't going outside the region, but it's actually staying in the region. So I think, yeah, we need to help to see how agencies can transition or move or, you know, open up new areas of the way that they work. I think a lot of the fundamentals, as you were saying, Laura, are actually the same, right? You still need to go through a discovery process. You still need to think about the UX. You still need to do a lot of the things that that traditional software development goes through. It's just it's the approach, and there's a lot of, I think, education / convincing to do for a lot of people.
I think we'll see the same, because there's a danger there, right? That people who have been citizen developers who've like kind of become really passionate about a particular platform can then pitch themselves as an agency in a particular building on a particular platform. Yeah. But actually there's no, what they're, in terms of the foundations, they're potentially going to be really problematic. Yeah. But I think again, coming back to the word, like to WordPress as an early example, it's the same thing. You've got people building really, really advanced, robust, secure sites using WordPress as a headless CMS or as a CMS, and then you've got people that do some nice design work on a template, but also say that they're a WordPress developer or a web designer. Like it's going to be the same thing, and it will come down to companies, to clients having their own process to determine whether or not someone actually is delivering what they're looking for. And then a second point on that, just thinking about agencies as, again, part of what felt like quite an interesting discussion around the future of no code, where people were sort of suggesting that actually, like I said, I know people who are now calling themselves bubble developers, but actually for some of these platforms to really embed themselves in our kind of ecosystem, in the future of the web, they need to become more like languages. So the idea is that as a developer, you might be a full stack developer, which includes Bubble or Adalo or Builder. Like actually, it just becomes another string to your bow. And you might, as an agency, have people who specialize in a particular, that you might be looking for someone who is a Webflow developer or whatever it might be. But actually, these agencies, it almost doesn't have to be as big a shift if you just start adding it to the skills that your team have. Yeah,
and as you said, I mean, there's a massive I think if you want to develop no code for something that's production ready, for example, you have to have done a lot of work to understand that you can do what you want in production with a lot of the particularly no code tools, because a lot of stuff isn't possible, right? Or is really hard to do, or requires development anyway. So yeah, it's a really interesting one. William, sorry for the wait, but please, what's your question? We can't hear you for some reason.
Might be on mute.
No, not on mute. Oh, you're really, really quiet, William. I can't actually. You.
Okay, turn my microphone up.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Classic.
I don't know why that was down low. Right. Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for the talk. It's really interesting to hear what you've been doing. And I can see the power in being able to prototype things really quickly. I guess my question for you is just about what you see in terms of the risk. If you're spending a long time really getting to learn a platform like Bubble, and you've invested a lot of time and you've built something with it that you want to be there for a long time, and then they go and change the way that they work or put their prices up or go out of business, how do you handle that sort of risk?
I suppose the way I'm seeing it is I'm looking to build and test an MVP, or I'm looking to prove the concept at this stage. So I've already had conversations with Ignite around sort of future plans that might mean redeveloping it, and it might mean actually even in terms of just the scalability of costs, it will potentially, with a large user base, be cheaper to have that owned and managed in-house. I this is my take on it, but it's the same, I suppose, the same as anything. If you're building on borrowed land, that's a risk. So yes, it is a risk. It's a risk I have considered. At this stage, I have nothing and no paying customers. So the risk kind of reward feels balanced in the right, like it's tipping in the right way. If I know that people are willing to pay for something that I've built, at that point, it then feels safer to invest. I don't know if I'll be totally honest, I don't know at this stage whether or not I would then look to bring people in to build out the platform on Bubble, or whether or not we would look to shift to something more bespoke. Fortunately, I don't have to make those decisions yet, but it's definitely a risk that I am aware of and talking about, and a lot of other people in like who are building it with Bubble and built in this space. It's a conversation that comes up quite regularly. I think
we get asked that question a little with our platform, and I think there's a couple of ways to look at it. So you can look at past profile. So how long has that platform existed? What's their customer base? What's their pricing strategy been over what period of time? So you've got the very conventional look at the legacy. How long have they been around? What have they done? And what's their track record? And you could look at escrow agreements and find out if the supplier is prepared to enter into an escrow agreement with you. And I think that would solve many of those concerns if they will enter into an escrow with you. But I think predominantly track record first and foremost, and that's not just longevity, it is to cover things like pricing profile and how the product has changed over years, etc., because the IT industry is full of horror stories like that. So due diligence.
Yeah, and I think like on that, like, so things like for me, the recent Series A that Bubble raised feels like it de-risks it a little bit. I know that they have $400 million to develop the platform. That gives them some degree of runway, that certainly to see me through the next like 12 to 18 months. So yes, it's again, I think it's the same conversations that you'd have as a client with any development project. Like, you need to be confident that the people that you're working with are going to be there. Do they have the track record? Do they, all the things Ian said? But that doesn't feel to me any different from when I've been in-house and I've looked for a web agency to come and build a website.
Yeah.
We have service level agreements with people. We check out references. It's the same, I suppose to say, the same due diligence.
Laura, I've seen the flip side of that comment you made as well. So I've seen organizations, if you've got $400 million of investment, you've got $400 million of debt. So I had an experience where one of our developers left and joined a company in the States, not in no code, but in software development. And they had, I think it was $100 million of investment. And it was a fantastic story, and everything was going to be, rosy, and the future was going to be absolutely fantastic. And 5 years later, they didn't exist.
Yeah.
And he's doing something else now,
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance on that raising rounds of investment and longevity, because the investors are looking for a fast buck and a quick bet, etc. And there's a pressure to succeed, and that will force those companies to fail or succeed quite quickly as well. So I would just temper that a little and balance that a little.
Yeah. I might be getting this wrong. I at least some of the platforms, you can do things like download the original, like you can download your code. So if you do want to move away, you've still got access to that. And I can't remember if that I should probably check. Can't remember if that is the case with Bubble. But yeah, so that with some, that feels like this. Sorry, my cat. It feels like there are. Again, you've got to weigh the risks and the reward and kind of make that determination for your project.
I suppose also question around, could you be afforded perpetual license? So if there is a situation where maybe there's a failure, could you carry on for as long as you want while you change track, or are you left stuck as well?
I think there's another point as well about firstly of the fact that a lot of these bits of software that are in the no-code space are, relatively speaking, new, present company accepted, Ian, and therefore there's a higher risk there. But one of the things we found is that, for example, you're often going to be using something as a base. So, for example, we use Airtable in quite a lot of things. If you use an Airtable, it actually plugs into a bunch of different things. So, for example, to have the same functionality in Softer as you do in Stacker, as you do in other things, actually is especially when you talk about the more sort of micro SaaS that Laura, you were referring to, it's actually only a few days of development to redevelop it in another platform. You've got your data, it's all there, it's all in one place, and therefore you can kind of move these things around, and so that stack becomes, you can choose your stack. I honestly think
that is an excellent point.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that, Adam.
I really think it's a very similar. A lot of the questions are very similar to, William, in our, in open source, as far as I'm concerned, there are so many projects in open source. Look at people using certain JavaScript frameworks and things that are now just falling off the plat. Look at open source communities that are falling apart and disappearing. You've got the same risks. Custom code, as far as I'm concerned, is the biggest risk of them all, because it's one company that's done it, and actually the investment you'd need should a different person come in and manage that is probably considerably higher. But again, it's all about scale, right? I mean, the no-code platforms, in my view, that are out there at the moment are not for major, large investment, production-ready tech developments. They're for digital developments.
I was agreeing with everything you said up to that point.
But I mean, I'm talking about the platforms now, though, Ian, in terms of a lot of they are very, Softer is a perfect example where we've just built something in Softer. It's restrictive. I mean, you can only do so much. We've had to work with the company to say, you've got to make these, in order to get this up for, less than a quarter of the price that it could have been, you're going to have to make these sacrifices, right? These particular things have to be done in a different way, or done, so on that kind of basis, I think a lot of the things that are out there now, Bubble's probably the only, and probably why, Laura, you chose it in the end. It's the only exception of the big. It feels like there's a big three already, right? But it's the only exception where actually it's that advanced that things are detached, and it's got its own ecosystem. It doesn't need to be driven by other systems out there. You don't need to join things together. You don't need Zapier and Airtable and things like that, which a lot of the other systems do. So again, I'm speaking very much from the kind of new age, and Ian, and very much the no code, really kind of build it, hack it together, or whatever the great explanation was, which I know there are lots of different platforms out there.
But I agree with you totally, and I hadn't thought about that. If you've invested 30 days or 40 days in building a significant project, and something did happen and that company did fail, what have you wasted? 30 days.
Exactly.
And if you can move that somewhere else and do that again in 30 days, because technology always moves on, your risk is actually very minimal.
As long
Excellent answer.
As long as the sector or subsector, if I can call it that, progresses as it is at the moment,
yeah,
I think that'll always be, there's a crest of a wave there that can be ridden on to an extent. But you're right. I mean, I think, William, there's major risks there, right? And in a way that you don't get with much more established platforms, and or you don't get in the same way. But I do think there's a certain amount of just due diligence stuff that you have to do anyway. The hardest bit now is that there's more choices for everyone, so it's harder to make that decision. You know what I mean? I think
that was one of the problems to start with. It felt like if I went down and lots of people that were saying this, like if you go to Bubble, you kind of have to commit to Bubble, whereas with a lot of other platforms, a lot of other sort of no code tools, it's a little bit easier. You can do a bit here and a bit there, and I always like the idea of I like testing things out, and I like that part of the process, and it is definitely you've got to kind of work out what's right for what you're looking to do, I suppose.
Which I think for the non-technical people, i.e. the clients or the people looking to develop the thing from a supplier and a supply and demand perspective, as I say, actually becomes really hard now, because you've got multiple levels of risks and multiple different things to think about, and it makes it very hard to make those decisions. I'm going to move up, Ben. I know you've had your hand up for, not literally, thank God, but for ages. So I'm going to come to you. What's your question?
Yes, thank you. Actually, it's just following on kind of what you just touched on there in terms of like pulling the trigger and deciding what tools to go with. Because I mean, I'm familiar a little bit with Glide because of the 100 days of no code, and I know that one, like you said earlier, Laura, that's done on like Google Sheets. So for argument's sake, if you have like, you need your database, and then you need like, say, I don't know, your website, then an automation tool in order to send like emails for when people sign up and stuff. So you got 3 there. You could have any permutation of God knows how many. Like you could use Google Sheets. You might choose, oh no, I'm going to do Airtable or whatever. It's kind of like it's the spoil for choice. I mean, like now, whenever I'm on social media, like because that's what I've been looking at, like it's a different tool should like targeted at me, and I'm like, oh well, there's another one. It's like, yeah, literally spoil for choice. So I think it's kind of like, where do you pull the trigger? I know like yours, like you said, you did the wrong tools first because you went with what was familiar to you, and then you went with Bubble because it's one of the broadest, although the steep learning curve. If you're going to do anything in no code, you're more than likely to do it in that, but there are so many about, so it's like, I don't know. Yeah, like I'm not quite at the point where I'm like ready to like do the steep learning curve Bubble just yet. I'm just playing around with all the different ones. I don't particularly have an idea or anything, but I'm just playing around with them. But see if an idea did strike, I don't know, like how at the moment it's not really a question, but it's like, I don't know how you would go about deciding that. So like you obviously went with Bubble because of like, you know, the scope of what you can do, but yeah, like how would you pull the trigger? Because I mean, I'm terrible. I go to a restaurant, I always regret what I've ordered because I'm just like looking at what the next person's ordered. Do you know what I mean? So I can't put my flag to the mast type of thing. So I think that's like kind of the difficult thing. But I don't know what your take on that kind of was, or whether you found yourself in a similar situation. So then you went with like Bubble, or.
So I mean, I suppose like there's quite like, even with the sort of that, I suppose that middle level of the pyramid, like there's a number of options you could use for your database. So you've got all your data. So you've got Sheets, you've got Rows, you've got Excel, you've got Airtable. Then you've got like the platforms that look specifically at the front end. Sorry, he's been away, so he's being very needy. But even again, thinking about like those platforms that manage that you could use as your database, there's similarities across them. So, and again, like before the full call started tonight, Adam and I briefly spoke. Like I've just downloaded or signed up to a Udemy course on Excel because I don't know how to use database. I don't know how to use spreadsheets properly. Like there are some fundamental functions that I have never learned, and I wasn't taught it at school. And But actually, once you know how to use those functions, they might be called something different in a different platform, but the functions are largely, sorry, it's going to end up knocking me off the computer. No, he's done this before. He ends up hitting leave meeting, and I'm like, moving everything out of his way. Yeah, so those functions might be called something different, but they works. There's a similar workflow across different platforms. So even if you ended up wanting to switch at a later point, once you know how the logic works, once you know how to structure a particular workflow, it should be easier to figure out how to do it within new platforms specifics. Same for the front end, like Adam was saying, like whether or not you're using Stacker or Softer or Adolo, like these, they do the same sort of thing. So I'd say if you've got something you're working on, pick one and get to grips with it. And then if at the point where it doesn't let you do what you want it to do, see if something else does. But everything, like I said in my talk, everything I've done from starting to work with automations through to playing around with some of the kind of the single use or single purpose things I was trying to build, that's all helped with getting to grips with the sort of the more complex builds. And again, because even the most complicated build is still broken down into a series of different workflows and a series of different functions. So even a really complicated website, you're probably going to have an integration that lets you have a mailing list. So if you've worked out how to do that, and you know that you really like ActiveCampaign to manage your emails rather than SendGrid, well, that's great. You know what your preference is.
Right.
I think that's where we've been recently, as you well know, Ben, but been doing a development which was an 8-week development, and the choices really were Softer or Bubble. That was kind of, when we came down to it, those were the two things we could see that there was a way to develop something. And the way we determined how to do that wasn't by just going in, further and further into feature sets and research and It was to start building it in Softer to the extent that we realized what it wasn't going to be able to do as we built it in week 1 and build as many of the basic features as we possibly could and try and just hack it together as quickly as we could to see how far we could get. Then we could go, right, okay, the decisions are we go down the Bubble route and it's going to mean this, this, and this. And we've got these, and we stuck with Softer at the end. But I think the other thing to bear in mind, I think at the minute, is that we found this particularly with Stacker, because they're all getting these big rounds of money in, the feature release rate is growing and growing. And so you've got new features coming out that make, you saw it with Webflow recently, and some massive announcements about the type of features that are going to be there. So what it might have to, again, if you're going down that minimal viable product route of testing an idea out, doing it in a basic way in order to get something out there and test that it works and de-risk it, as David was talking about, then actually, it just comes back to what I was saying before, I guess, that Ian picked up on. It's about what you got to lose as much sometimes as it is about what you're actually going to win. So I think there's an element of suck it and see at the moment, because there's so many in there, in my view, still in their massive infancy. When you look at the likes of Ian, who's been doing this for that length of time, it's these companies are really just taking baby steps at the minute.
I think it's the fast iterations of the fast development where that's kind of accentuates my FOMO, because do you know what I mean? If I pick one and then I get so far into it, and then a couple of weeks later I'm like, and then you see another one brings out a new feature and you're like, I would have really liked that, but didn't have it at that time. I've been looking a little bit at Glide, and I think Glide looks pretty cool, but it's based on Google Sheets, and I know that they've got it in their roadmap to do Airtable, which I quite like Airtable because you can throw images in and then it'll actually pull them, whereas Google Sheets, it has to be a URL hosted image or something. That was one thing which I noticed about that. So I thought, it's easy to just throw an image or upload an image to Airtable. But if then, when Glide does get the Airtable, then that means I'm not then having to host images separately kind of thing. I can just throw them in Airtable. It'll do the same. So I quite like that. But then I'm apprehensive about doing anything in that necessarily until it's kind of there. Do you know what I mean? So I'm kind of
decisions, Ben. You got to make.
I know I'm terrible. Honestly, I can never make decisions. I've got the worst. I always struggle to pull the trigger with anything. You should see is honestly when I'm getting food in a restaurant, I'm horrendous.
I think that's where with like the on deck program, that was one of the most valuable things, was that they were just like, just ship it. And I know that's such an American phrase, just but that idea of like, just get it out there. You don't like, you're not committing to that platform for the rest of your life. You're spending the next 7 days using it. Yeah. And if you don't like it, you can move on to something next week. And that kind of quick pace, you're going to just keep building and keep building and keep building, was really, well, yeah, it was really useful.
I think the other bit of advice I would give you is Laura put a pyramid in her presentation, and I use a quadrant sometimes, but you can categorize no-code platforms. So I would investigate, what is that no-code platform trying to be? What is their end game? And if that doesn't align with what your end solution is, there's a major decision straight away. Don't use that. You know, we are very good at what we do, but we don't fit into some of the categories that Laura talked about, and therefore we would be quite poor at those aspects. So I would work out, what is that platform trying to be in the world as your first point of call, really.
One observation on that level as well with the current platforms. Not modern is by far the worst thing to say, but the new offer is that a lot of them, especially for the citizen developer, they'll start off at a price that is really accessible and really kind of acceptable and normal. But if it's a hobby project, as you want to get more complex, the prices soon escalate. It's a lot like HubSpot, for example. You know, you get this, it's amazing because I've got this free CRM, and then as soon as you realize that actually the vast majority of the real kind of game-changing features, the costs just start massively escalating. So it's really, it is important to look at those feature sets early on and think about scale and what your plan for scale is, because yeah, it can start getting quite expensive, especially if you're looking at sort of more like hobby projects or you know, things that you're just doing for a short lifespan or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions before we wrap up? The Q&A is great in this.
Did I just mess up big time, or was there a fault with the URL, the Zoom link for this? For some reason, I registered late. I registered this morning, and the email I got, I clicked on it, and it was taking me to last month's meeting. I don't know why, unless I messed up.
No, that might be the email. It might be my administration fault, and actually you've reminded me to go and double check. So I have put the event for next month live on Eventbrite and Meetup already, but if you sign up on Eventbrite, you're probably going to get a link for last month's. So yeah, no, that's probably my fault, Ian. There's that many, the usual kind of no code, and it's going to get more complex because I think we're going to be building something in Softer soon, but there's that many places to upload it to try and hit as many different channels as possible that that's probably just one that I've missed off. So I will go into Eventbrite and look at the email notification link and make sure that it's up to date in there. So thanks for the heads up, and apologies it took you a while to get in.
No problem.
One more question. The slides you put on earlier about the plans for the network, are you sharing those?
I can do, yeah, and there'll be the video of this as well. In terms of sharing the slides, I can, it's just where to share them. If you go on Slack channel, David, then I can post them in there. I don't really want to send an email to everyone, if you see what I mean. I can actually...
Yeah, Slack's fine. Cheers, I'm on the Slack.
Great. So just a reminder that there is a Slack channel there. I'm going to try and sort of, what's the word? Inspire some conversations and what have you, and try and keep it up to date. I've been going through it. I think most people are aware I've been going through a transition role-wise, which is now almost complete. So I'll have hopefully a bit more time to invest in making driving the conversation a little bit. But yeah, any conversations people want to have, you know, I think we're having some really great ones at these events, but I'd really like to see how we can start pushing that out. And I think just on one thing you said before, Laura, about that Excel thing, I'm really excited about the education aspect of this, because the fact is that there's a perfect example of how you can teach someone Excel, and that can help to understand how they could actually be building no-code apps. I think in that sense is a real opportunity. I want to work with Max, who's already developing something with schools, no code schools, but also look at the university level, and we'll need people around to be able to justify that there's going to be opportunities for people, and that this is a space which it's not just Software City that are banging on about it.
That is an excellent point as well. We struggle to find people. So we've started engaging with schools in the Northeast to go out and raise awareness, and it's working well for us. But I would say finding people who've got the appropriate channel, whether it's through apprenticeships or school education, not so much graduates, the education system isn't really geared up for no code. So you don't fit the model, if you see what I mean. It's quite difficult.
I think to be fair, it as I said before, I mean, we've got skills. Our organization is based on market failure. We do things where there is a problem, right? And we've got skills department at the moment there to look at this in terms of coding. I think no code opens up a whole load of new doors, but also it helps that funnel as well. I think there's just, for me, it's definitely got a place. It's just we've all got to work out where the hell it is, and through Digital Union, through the talent engine with Dynamo and various other things, that there's a lot of work going into how we can help develop those skills. I think no code's got to play a really important part in that, because it can be pivotal for a lot of it. Super. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming. Massive big thank you, Laura, for that talk. It was great, and obviously the Q&A that came afterwards will live in legends as being longer, nearly 3 times the length of the talk. So there you go. But really appreciate it, and hope we'll see you at future meetups. And next one, 5th of April. And as I said, it's on Eventbrite and Meetup now. If you do go on Meetup, please do also log on Eventbrite if you can, because it just helps us in terms of tracking numbers. But thank you very much, and hopefully see you all soon.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye now.
Bye.